Hello aspirants, welcome back to the daily news analysis of the Hindu. This is a free initiative brought to you by Transform IAS Academy. In this particular video, we shall be looking into the articles which shall be extremely important for the civil service exams, especially for the prelims mains. So let us now begin with our discussions for 7th of December 2019. So the first news which talks on the Rana extradition unlikely before 2023 indicates the US. So this basically with respect to the Mumbai attack which has been happened on 26/11. On limelight of it, this particular person, Mr. Rana, that is Tahavur Hussain Rana. So he is the main, accused person when it comes to the 2008 attack. So as of now, this is a case where the statements has been coming where they wanted to actually book this person and extradite him from the said USAs. So there are certain requirements to what you have to know as per this is that here the National Investigating Agency team that was in the USA, so it had actually went that it wanted to seek for the extradition of Rana. So because he was one of the close associate of the David Cloman Headley. So he is actually a Chicago based businessman and he also has been done the schooling and his school friend was actually the David Coleman. So both here the Rana had actually helped this particular David where he actually helped him to open an immigration firm in Mumbai so that they were able to do with all the fake registrations and with respect to giving the documentations on the fake immigration processes. So this was purely where they wanted to use this slot of area where they wanted to execute this particular attack on Mumbai back in 2008. So over the time, as he was a prime person who was being providing with a material support to Pakistan based luxury Taiba. So he was one of the main person who was actually transferring the equipments, that is the materials for terror attacks. And here in the extradition request, India has actually wanted that this person to be again given back to India. But what is the problem as of now to what India has been facing is that, so here this particular person was arrested back in 2009. So he was actually served with a sentences of 14 years of the US for providing the material support for the terror outfit, that is Luxury Taiba. And over the time, and this particular person's ideally for 14 years to what he has been saving and other all those things till 2023 is what his particular time period is going to be. But India wants this person back. So what is this? The India has been taken the steps is that now India has actually engaged the talks with the USA authorities so that it wanted to get the person under the India-US extradition treaty of 1997. So this is basically for the custodies of the US based individuals for their role in whatever that had happened back in 2008 under the terror attacks. So you should know that as we discussed, this person is actually the Chicago based businessman. So now what's the problem is that as per the US extradition part, here they don't entertain with a double jeopardy. So double jeopardy is a condition where a person who has got the punishments, he would not be getting the punishments for the same offense twice, which means that basically this kind of a law, that is the double jeopardy clause of the US, is actually prohibits the punishment of any person who has been got the punishments earlierly and they wanted to punish him on the same grounds. So here what is India stating is that now India is not going to arrest this person on the attack of the Mumbai based on 2008. Rather the ground what India is stating is that this person was also actively involved in planning an attack on the National Defense College in Delhi and the Chabad House. This is actually a Jewish religious centers in several cities. So these are the two other areas where this person has been part of. So taking this as a ground, now India wants to say that here this person was actively involved apart from the Mumbai attack on these grounds. So here India wants to take this person under custody on these grounds, but any which way till 2023 India would not be able to have this person under the control. So this is one of the important issue to what you have to know. Basically you don't have to memorize about this person or the details about this person, but rather what you have to do is about the India-US extradition treaty of 1997, and most importantly you should know what is this double jeopardy. So if there is a sentences like this, how can India come out of the situations, and what would be the other grounds that India really wants to get that person under the surveillance. So in limelight of this was one of the informations that you have to know. What would be the other grounds that India is trying to get this person back into India. So this becomes important for us to understand how the countries from one another, they can actually work on to the aspects, and if one country blocks in, what would the other country actually do up with. So this is something you have to know. This is best a basic. And the next one, this is like the boulders fall in Meghalaya mine killed 2. So this again the second disaster which is actually struck in the Meghalaya's illegal coal mines. So this is second instance in the less than a month. So they are almost claiming that 2 of the people have lost their life, and this has happened in the Muknor in Jalha village. So this particular incident actually happened on Friday. 2 people have lost their life. This is basically on the rat hole mine that branches from the bottom of the vertical pit. So you know that this particular news is repeatedly there because of the illegal mining which is actually happening on the Jaintia hills. So this is a second instance which has been happening. So I can go through with this, a continuation story. And down here we have this Aadhaar and driving license may be linked. So this basically with respect to the Union Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad, he is actually saying that the government is coming up with a move where it wanted to mandate linking the Aadhaar with the driving license. So why is it so important that the government is really looking out to increase with this particular Aadhaar to the driving license is because of the run and hit cases. So what presently happening is that whatever happens is purely on the basis where most of the people, they commit a scene and they commit a incident and they just run it off. But here what they see is immediately when they get to know they would be getting under the problem, immediately they are able to come up with a duplicate license. So this is a situation where most of the people are trying to escape. But when it comes to Aadhaar, they would not be able to produce this duplicate license because they can change their names, but not when it comes to the biometrics, neither the iris nor the fingerprints of the person. So whenever they apply for a license, there would be a indication and alert that this license has already been issued. So the person would not be able or affordable or eligible to ensure with another license. So basically it is barring a person from going for additional license and also make him to be guilty to whatever the mistakes he has done. For example, an accident. So if the life has been lost, he has to get the punishment to whatever the negligence driving he has been done. So taking this into consideration, now the Aadhaar would be getting linked with the driving license as soon as possible is what the government is making its statement. So the reasons is sounding to be a little justifiable because of the biometric and also the iris and the fingerprints which has been undertaken with the Aadhaar. So we will be able to track the person and also punish him for the mistakes to what has been done. So these were the important articles that you have to know from the front page. So on the page 7, we had this news which talks on the tribals of West Bengal battling the food scarcity. This is purely the study which has been undertaken, and this particular study was being titled as an inquiry into the world of the Adivasis of West Bengal. So this is the title of the study to what is being done. So this is purely because of the incidents 2 months after the West Bengal government which actually denied that the food scarcity as a possible cause for the death of the 7 persons. So you know that from a tribal community there was nearly 7 people lost their life, and here the West Bengal government had denied that this was not something which had happened due to food scarcity. But since there was a report which was being undertaken and the report identified that the food scarcity is a varying degrees and it is almost seen as 31% of high in the tribal households in the West Bengal. So as per this particular report to what is being given, it has been stating that the survey was conducted in almost like 1000 tribal households where they would ascertain mainly on the living conditions, health and the education. These were the 3 factors to what the survey would actually be focusing on. As per that, they got to know that the West Bengal is actually the home of nearly 5 million tribals, and this is almost accounting for 6% of the India's tribal population of 100 million. So on total we have 100 million, 5 million alone is there in the West Bengal, and that 5 million is accounting for 6% of it. So this is like the tribals of the states are far behind when compared to the human development. They are not been actually correlating with the human development, rather they have been far behind it. And moreover, there have been the contention in the recent months that the deaths of the several tribals in the span of 15 days which has been happened, and that is the reason being a scarcity of the food. So scarcity of the food being the major reasons to why the people around the tribal community are giving up with their lives. So going forward, the report also claimed that there were almost like 31% of the surveyed households which were purely facing a food scarcity, and they also faced an acute hunger only in some months, that is especially in the October and the August month, and there several people had been only having half meals only twice a day. So twice a day, half a meal is what it used to be their main companion, and most of the time the elderly people, they end up eating once a day. So they not have the foods as well in a proper aspects. So this was basically, they were telling that if they have to talk about the addictions of the poverty born vices, that is especially the alcoholism or the fragility of the public health system, there seems to be much low when it compares to life chances among the Adivasis, because they have not the people who have been privileged for their citizenship. So they are not been privileged to be called as a so citizens. So basically this is one of the report which is actually highlighting that the food scarcity is one of the biggest problem to what the tribal community has been facing, and especially the reports is from the West Bengal. And here the degradation of the forest and the environmental degradation is one of the most important reasons to why they have reduced with the availability of the natural nutrients, resulting in early deaths as well. So here we know that repeatedly there is a lot of degradations of the forest and the environment degradations as well. So here we know that we are also spoiling the forest, at the same time the people who are dependent on the forest as well, even their lives is being turned upside down. So this is something we need to focus on. And the premature death is also one of the important aspects to what the report has actually been indicated. So as per this, the stating is that it was almost like 52, among which 48 were premature deaths, and only 4 were used to be to an old age, but most of them the people used to die as with the premature deaths. So as per, apart from that, they were also talking that the work participation rate, that is the WPR, is higher among the Adivasis in Bengal, because here the children's, that's work participation rate is more. Why? Because most of the children's were being forced to discontinue the schooling, so that they would be more towards working atmosphere, so that they would be helping the family in order to get supported with. So this was something. And apart from that, as per the 2011 census, the work participation rate, it used to be like 39% in Bengal, but right now it has moved on to 49%. And the figures of the Adivasis have actually got decreased from 49 with respect to 49 and the 47%. This is like they are showing the mode of participations with children. So this is one of the aspects to what you have to know. And here both the children or elderly people are actually being involved in working, because since they tend to move for a transition for a longer period from one place to one place, because they don't find the settlements out there. Since a settlement has been a question out there, here the children's education are actually not being guaranteed. And here you have the key findings, like 66% of the households that do not have a proper drainage system, 61% are actually been seeking the treatment from the private practitioners, that is Adivasi patients, wherein 8% of them are actually walk more than 1 kilometer just because they need to attend with a primary school, not even in secondary, just for a primary school they have to walk a kilometers, wherein population which has been aware of these rights under the recognitions are purely like the recognitions of the Forest Rights Act 2016 were only 14%, and 12% as per the survey it's been understood that most of them get been feeded half a meal twice a day, that's it, wherein the 50% of the students are actually been pursuing the elementary, taking up private institutions, and 53% of the people are involved in generating the work rather than getting into the education. So this is the correct situation and the most important thing that you have to know to why and how are the tribal communities actually being connected with. And you should also know what are the other kinds of a step the government has been taken, like with respect to Ekalavya residential schools, or with respect to other forms where they really wanted to help the people who come from the minority sector. So if there's any schemes that you have to memorize, you need to Google up and get the schemes and ensure that how are the tribal community being supported by the government. So this is one of the issue. And down here we have this, the railway proposed a new security plan at the stations. So this basically the railway stations which would be working with par with the airports. So here what they are saying is that just to ensure to have a proper security checks, because as in more we know that a lot of incidences and casualties which actually keeps on happening on the railway stations with respect to bombing or whatever it is. So they here wanted to implement a proper security check. For that security check, hereafter the railway would actually be requesting the passengers to be arrived 15-20 minutes earlier, so that they can actually schedule and they would be able to departure the trains to complete with the security checks. So the area which is a crowded area, which is a negligible area, now can be get under a proper scrutiny, and the security checks also can happen more. So this is a new kind of a security plan proposal to what they have been given. and moreover this is again a minute to what is being covered, but again this is a main news to what you have. And here we have the orange alert sounded for Pabuk. So, it's basically the center has now given orange alert for Andaman and Nicobar Highlands. So, here because there is a cyclonic storm called Pabuk which is actually appearing and it is approaching near the archipelago. So, this is the one which is hovering towards the Andaman Sea and also the neighboring. So, this particular means is all about they wanted to increase the likelihood of the bad and the extreme weather, and this would actually disrupt the road and rail travel as well. This might threaten the life and the property of the people, so that the people have to be taken under the alert of the orange, so that they have to ensure that a proper security for the people has to be given into back in Andaman and Nicobar areas. So, this is there. The next news, this is purely which talks on the panel to go into quota for Assamese. So, this is basically with respect to the Assam Accord. So, you should first note to the context that the Union Minister, earlierly we also saw the other day that the Union Minister would be setting up with a high level committee, so that they would be looking into the implementation of the clause 6 of the Assam Accord, so that they would be able to come up with a proper composition and terms for the reference of the committees as well. So, they would be looking into the issues which is actually related to the Bodo community. So, this Bodo community issue would be related over the time, and the clause 6 of the state of Assam Code is nothing but where they would be envisaging with an appropriate social, constitutional, legislative and administrative safeguards that would be provided basically to protect, preserve and promote the cultural, social, linguistic identity and also the heritage of the Assamese people. So, the committee will now hold the discussions with the stakeholders and also assess the required quantum of the reservations of seats in the Assam Assembly and also the local bodies for the Assamese people. So, that was the main work the committee would be doing. So, this would actually look into the protections of the Assameses and also the indigenous language people, so that the reservation in state government jobs or they would be able to promote them to the best. So, they would also be giving up with the proper kinds of suggestions to what has to be done and other things. As per the Assam Accord, you should know that here any person who came to the state after the midnight of March 24, 1971 will be identified as a foreigner. So, the proposed bill is seen to violate the Assam Accord by differentiating between the migrants and also the basis of the religion. So, what bill are we talking about? Basically, we are talking about the interlinkage of the Citizenship Amendment Bill 2016. So, this might actually become a problem, and basically the thing what you have to know in the Assam Accord is nothing but it was a memorandum of settlement which was being signed between the Government of India and the leaders of the Assam movement, which had happened back in 1985. So, these people are the one who actually signed this, and this accord brought an end to the Assam, that is the agitation, and also it paved way for the leaders, so that they would be more towards to form a political party, and also they will also have a form of the government in the state government soon as possible. So, this was something the Assam Accord had given, and over the time the Bangladeshis who came between, like let us say it was a high time between 1966 and 1971, they will be barred from voting for any oaths for 10 years, because this is purely the accord also mentions that the international borders will be sealed, and also the persons who crossed over the Bangladesh after 1971 are to be deported back. So, though the accord brought an end to the agitation, but the certain implementations was still a question mark out there. So, that implementation is what has to be ensured, and the implementation should be guaranteed as per the clause 6 of the Assam Accord. So, this was purely against the protest which was been happening against the Citizenship Bill Amendment Bill, that is 2016, which was actually violating with the Assam Accord. So, on limelight of this present news to whatever we saw earlierly and what we just discussed right now, it is purely where the panel is now been gonna look on to the quota for the Assameses. So, now the center is actually setting up a high level committee which would be actually headed by an IAS officer. So, he would actually assess the appropriate level of the reservations in the seats of the Assam Assembly and also the local bodies and also the Assamese people. So, they would also be providing with employment on the opportunities as well. So, this is a present issue to what you have to know to what is going wrong with the Assam. Try to get more in detail about what is in clause 6 of the Assam Accord, what is Assam Accord and what is the problem with the Citizenship Amendment Bill. So, if you know these three things, you will be done with the present article. So, this we have already dealt, that is the reason I am not giving in detail, I have just given a glancing to what we have done in the past. So, this is on that. and this one, the defense manufacturing rules eased. So, this basically the government has now issued a notification, and this notification is a move where they wanted to simplify the process for approval of the manufacturing. So, whatever the ranges of the approval would be given for the manufacturing of the defenses or with respect to the sort of the these things, then aerospace equipment and components by the private industries. So, hereafter the private industries can also be a part of the manufacturing as per their notification which has been issued by the government. They wanted to simplify the process at the earliest. So, this would actually bring them under the licensing authority of the DIP, that is the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion. So, this notification was actually been dated with a press note of January 1st. So, this is one of it, and this is purely comes in the Ministry of the Commerce and the Industry. So, these are basic things to what you have to know from this present article. But apart from that, you should know about the building of the warships, how it actually happens. So, basically these items are actually categorized into three. The first category is the defense aircraft, the second is the warship of all kinds, and the third is the allied items of the defense equipment. So, all this warship they would be actually on the surface and the subsurface levels. So, here the defense the one items would be requiring for industrial licensing even before they start up with any sort of a manufacturing extent. So, here they would actually acquire the benefits either from tier 1 or tier 2 vendors, giving them the boost for the MSC sectors, that is the small and the medium enterprises. So, for limelight of this you have to know about one thing which is called as an ASHOM, that is the industry body which is associated chambers of the commerce and industry of. So, basically this notification was actually supersedes with a dip earlierly to the issuement to what they have given in back in 2014, where they wanted to segregate the different items into two categories. So, by the two different acts, and those two different acts are basically the Industries Development and Regulation Act of 1951 and the Arms Act of 1959. So, when we have to discuss on to these particular foreign manufacturers, the move is also expected, so that they wanted to have a partnership with the private sectors. So, the partnership is basically on the OEM, that is the foreign original equipment manufacturers. So, this particular defense ministry has also come up with a new ambitious program, and that is called as a strategic partnership model under the defense procurement procedure. So, basically they would be covering with 4 specific areas where they wanted to promote the role of the private sectors in the defense industry, that is a manufacturing sector. Even this one we have seen earlier also, where the private partnership they wanted to deep root it, so that even they can be a participators when it comes to the defense manufacture. And however, they also wanted to finance this particular model, but it is actually been on the slow mode. So, basically now the ASHOM, that is basically they call it as an Associated Chamber of the Commerce Industries of India, they would be actually become the creations for the strong supply chain, which would be actually been more on a critical basis. So, this is basically what is that you have to know from this particular coverage of the article, is that now the licensing processes would be made simpler, so that more of the private industries can also be under the defense manufacturing sectors. So, this is all about it, and you should also know that the country is moving towards a technology transfer. So, since a technology transfer is there, we need to have the manufacturers hub. That is all about creating with the help of the private sectors as well. Wherein simultaneously you can see another news which talks on the CAT backlog mounts on as the post vacant. So, this vacancy with respect to the CAT, which is called as the Central Administrative Tribunal, which actually adjudicates the recruitment on also the service related cases. So, basically it will be functioning based what is actually been a sanctioned post is 66 and what many people are working is just 31. So, even here you have a lot of issues which is associated with the post which is actually lying vacant. So, on limelight of this, now the Parliamentary Standing Committee is actually heading on mounting the backlog of the cases. So, they wanted to ensure that the cases will be sorted out very faster, and what has to be done, they are trying to make the moves on the earlier basis. So, here this one you should know. So, as this news would again be in the news if they wanted to film the post. So, what is that they have taken the move and what is the committee stating on it, you will be getting in the further aspects. So, this is about the basic things where it has actually got lesser and what is that they have to do, how many postings are being there, by when it has been actually vacant, by what they have to do, you will have the details out here. So, you can just go through with that. And this one, the understaffed CBI a concern, says the panel. So, again this is a standing committee which has again raised a concern on the non-filling of the vacancies, and this non-filling of the vacancies is under the CBI. So here you should know that the CBI investigations to what they actually do, they actually take up with the main pertaining cases like the internal security, cyber crimes, corruption, financing, irregularities, and also the nations, which is purely where they make the investigations to be more of a realistic and they get to find and dig out the truths. But here the problem is that now the CBIs have been actually not performing well with respect to, they have been understaffed. The staffs are not been properly having the investigation processes, or thus it has been ill prepared, and there's a lot of vacancy concerns as well which has been raised in this particular CBI part. So what they have to do is that now a committee would be recommending that they need to ensure that the government would actually simplify the recruitment rules to overcome with the procedural bottlenecks. So here the main understanding to what they felt was the most of the vacant position in the executive rank is because of the more the tougher recruitment rules, which is what is being faced. So on limelight of this, the officers technically and law officers or the executive rank officers, they are almost with 16%, 28% and also with 56% respectively. And when we have to look on to the top level, so there are total 4 posts of the special directors or the additional directors. Out of the 4, 3 are actually vacant, which means that only 1 person is being there. So this is also another area where the CBI director's investigation process cannot be up to the mark because of that, because there's a lot of vacancies which has been there. So on limelight of this, the Department of the Personnel and the Training has taken the efforts to fill the vacant CBI post by fine-tuning the recruitment rules. So once the recruitment rules has been fine-tuned, so that the more people can actually be recruited to the CBI's the panel, and then they would be able to ensure the works would be done better, investigations can be done on a timely basis, as more and more cases which has also been pending with the CBI. So if the cases have been pending with the CBI, if they are not able to give the reports, which means that the justice would be totally delayed and it will be denied over the time. So they don't want these things to happen. So that's the reason the Parliamentary Standing Committee has raised the concerns on non-filling of the vacancies in the CBI. So this is one of the issue, and this we saw with respect to the CAT, that's a Central Administrative Tribunal as well. So these are like, if you see from the past months, we are seeing that there's a lot of vacancies which has been there. So what is the problem associated with that, and what should the government do is what the concern is right now. So this is something where you have to know the lot of postings which is getting vacant. So pertaining to that, pertaining to the sectors or to the constitutional bodies and non-constitutional bodies, there will be certain questions which would be asked in your preliminary examination, so that you can focus more on these aspects, so you will be able to attempt the questions to whatever is being posed in your exams. So this is about it. So under the business column we have this, which is on the GST can boost direct indirect tax collections, says the experts. So this is basically the fact that now we know that the government is actually increasing the dependent on the tax revenue, because we also know that in recent times the tax analysts have been saying is that here the GST has not been up to the mark when it comes to the tax collection. But what you have to know is that here the government wants to meet its fiscal requirement. So that's the reason the tax revenue is actually been getting more, but it's not to be worried, because here the tax analysts have been stating is that really this GST have not yet taken the effect so far. So once the GST effect is being seen, then we would not be having any of the problems which would be associated with the government relevance on the tax basis or onto the tax revenues. Once the government would be able to do it, they would be able to collect a good revenue from both the direct as well as the indirect taxes. Both can be done. So here from the budget documents, it's been clear that the last 5 years have shown that the government's dependence on the tax revenues has actually steadily increased, and that increase actually marked to the total 70% of the receipts in 2018 and 19 from 65% in 14 and 15. So almost like 5% which has been increased. So correspondingly you can also see that here the share of the revenue from the non-tax sources which is actually being getting from the dividends from the PSUs, or it might be from the disinvestments. From both the aspects, that the non-tax revenues are actually been declining over the time. So here the government cannot take risk when it comes to increasing the tax rates, because it's a analysis which has been stating is that here there might be, whether it is a direct or indirect, for the fear of the backlash from the public. But any which ways, only one option what the government is left out is that it need to boost with the tax revenues. So it has to increase with the tax base to stop the tax evasion. So once it has been able to do it, then both the government would be able to get benefited out of it. So on limelight of this, it is understood that since the GST has not been performing well, it is a high time that the government is increasingly depending on the tax revenue, so that it has to increase with the direct taxes or the indirect taxes at the same time. So this is about it, and apart from that, you should also know that now the government has taken with the several steps where they wanted to come up with these business wise monthly GST payments as well. So they have to generate with the e-way bill data as well. They have to initiate with the evaluation options where they would be enhancing with the GST taxpayer database and revenues. So likewise, you should also know that the GST data would be correlated, and this correlation would purely with respect to the information relevant from the income tax payment perspective, so that the incorrect tax filings can actually be corrected and revenues can be enhanced for the same. So there is a lot of mistakes which is also being after the implementation of the GST, as the people are still not aware to what has to be done. So there is a lot of incorrect tax filings has been happening. So this can be corrected, and one side the tax revenues can also be enhanced over the time. So again, you should also know about the detecting with the tax evasion. So there are certain expansion of the GST taxpayer base where they are actually filing the returns compliance and using the large amount of the data which has been available to detect the tax evasion. So this would be one of the most important cornerstone of the government measures where they wanted to enhance with the tax revenues. So basically now the government is looking into all the spheres where the loopholes have been there. They wanted to correct it, and at the same time they wanted to enhance the tax revenues, as there is no much of good returns which is actually getting flooded from the GST revenues. So here, apart from that, the banking, which is on the increased economic activity and the higher GDP growth, will actually boost the consumption, so that they would actually enhance that the indirect tax would be a little more better aspects. When it comes to indirect tax rate has been fixed, there is a kind of an price inflation also which happens. Whenever there is a price inflation, the government would actually get benefited, because the people, they end up paying for the product on the higher prices. So the tax components also goes up, so government also would be getting a little bit of amount when it comes to indirect taxes as well. For any goods that you purchase, you are actually paying the taxes, but just that not in the name, but it is on a indirect tax base. So the second aspect what can be seen here is that whenever there is a GDP growth, the consumption also grows, and the indirect taxes also would be making with their productions much more better, so that the revenue can also be generated through the indirect tax revenues. So efficiency gains is that most over the efficiency gains of the GST, they haven't kicked in. Once they do so, then you can actually see the revenue buoyancy in the next 3-5 years. So the government, they need not look into all these things and be under a problematic, so they can ensure that. And moreover, you should also know that the more dependent on these efficient gains, where the government is purely increasing with the dependence on the indirect tax collections, is actually one single source, and that single source is the oil. And apart from that, the non-tax revenue what the government is trying to raise a fund is purely from the public sector companies, the Reserve Bank of India, and also through the disinvestment. So these are the main areas where the government would be actually making the revenue, and that is purely on the non-taxes basis. So here the budget also says that the analysis of the budget data, the PSU dividends as a proportion of the non-tax revenue, they have been growing over the years. And if you see here from 2014 and 15, it is from almost from 16%, it has got increased to 21.4%, that is in 2018 and 19. So here the government has reported that here they are actually pressurizing on the state-run oil companies to transfer a larger dividends to the center every year. So this is one of the areas that we really have to focus on if the government is pressurizing more on the oil companies. So in return, it is again which is going to affect the people in return. So this is one they have to need to understand, that the dependence of the government should actually be reduced when it comes to the non-tax revenues on the oil companies. And this is reportedly, it's been said that these oil companies actually buy back the shares, and it is also pushing more of the PSUs to be listed onto the stock exchanges. So these non-tax revenues, if they actually look to come to more of the majority, they have to come from auctioning spectrum, they have to get the license, they have to get the royalties from the oil sectors, etc. So this is all because of the disinvestments, and also this is the disinvestment process to what the government would be looking at to widen up with the revenues from the sectors. So this is the one thing which you have to know. So basically, if you have already dealt with respected to the tax collections, you have to go through the chapter with respected to the balance of the payments, and also the trade, and also with the GSTs, the public finances. So when you know that, these things actually becomes easy, so that you will be able to focus much more better. So if you are for the first time, if you are getting the concepts of these things, it might be a little confusing aspects, but once the chapters are being done, or once you see the required books and all, you will be able to get the concepts on these. So this is about the news, and this one we have on the hydro projects of 5950 megawatt has been stalled. So this is basically as many as 16 hydropower projects, that is almost like 5950 megawatt capacity has been installed. And why it has been stalled is because of the financial constraints, and other reason is that most of the government are trying to bring the hydro policy at the earliest time to whatever they are given as a deadline. So that is one of the reasons to why the hydro projects have been stalled as of now. So of total 37 hydropower projects of 12 gigawatt generation capacities are under construction in the country, but out of these, 16 with a total generation of 5950 megawatt are either stalled or they have been held up due to financial constraints. So this is what the problem the hydropower projects in India actually been facing, and they also said that out of the 16, the 10 stalled are purely basically because of the financial stress. And moreover, the government is also working on the hydro policy that would actually provide for a longer loan repayment period, so that they would be looking for a lower interest rate. Secondly, on the other incentives as well, so that they can bring down the tariff on these particular projects. So this is again an alternative to what the government is looking out for. And moreover, the Power Ministry has informed about formulating a hydro policy where the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Energy would be looking out for. So the policy also would be set up so that it will actually look into the kinds of issues the hydropower sector has been facing, and also the stiff competition to what the clean sources are actually been facing also from the thermal powers as well. So basically they would be looking into the policies of these, and they would be coming up with those kinds of an draft data plan to what would actually be the best practices that they need to have it when it comes to the hydro projects. So this is the present situations to the conditions of the hydro projects. So this is the informations that one should know what's pertaining with the hydropower projects. So this is about, so under business review you have this spanner in the works. This is basically with the infrastructure projects. So since it's a business review, every Mondays you get this column of the business review, you can just look on to this. And this is again the news which is on the bad loans. The banks get a breather on the bad loans. So since we have already dealing with this several times, so I request you all to just go through it, because it's same repetition with respect to GNPA. That's a financial stability report to what the RBI had given. They have given an analysis on that. You can go through with that. And this one, can open market operations ease tight the liquidity conditions? So again, this was repeatedly on the news with respect to CRR and the SLR. That is the cash reserve ratio and the statutory liquidity ratio by 1%. So this is a thing to what we have dealt it earlier as well. So you can just look on to this with respect to NDTL, what is the one, and with respect to the WCR, that's a weighted average call rate which has been there. You can look on to this. So this again the issue which you have to know. The basically what you have to take as a key learn from that is, from this is that you need to know what is CRR, when it is used, what is SLR, and when it is used. So this is all about it, and the earlier videos we have discussed about it. You can go through with that. So under the life column we have this news which is on the International Space Station crew could grow beans in 2021. So this is basically where they are looking out for cultivating the lettuce in the space 3 years ago. So it was one of the thing which they had been doing better but now it is a time where the International Space Station is trying to grow beans in 2021. So this is as per the new research suggestions to what they have given, and this particular beans cultivation is coming with a collaborations with respect to the Norwegian University of Science and Technology and with the Italian and the French researchers as well. So they wanted to cultivate, and this cultivation is on the plant based food for the long space journeys, because maximum if you see any space stations, people they would be staying for almost like 6 months, but here when it goes to the Mars, when people actually travel to Mars to understand about it, then it at least require a year. For those kinds of a year, what is that alternative that the people have to look on, because most of the observators from the earth, they actually are gonna stay with the International Space Stations, which is a zero gravity. There won't be a gravity at all. People actually they would be tend to flying out there. So when it comes to these things, so most of these astronauts, the main dream of them is that they wanted to eat the tasty foods, but they would not be possible to have it, because most of the people they move on for this kinds of packed food, and that is the food which would be stored almost for 3 to 6 months or for 8 months in a year. So which means that they're gonna have all these preservative foods, and most of them do not get the proper food items when they move on for the International Space Station. So this move is actually to come out of this particular drawback, and they wanted to make the particular kinds of vegetables and the other things to be grown, so that the astronauts they can actually use of it, so they would be able to use it for the much more better aspects. So they can also depend on the vegetables which has been grown out there. And here this particular researchers are actually performed 3 experiments before they could study, which could publish this particular journal Life. The first 2 experiments are basically which is actually restricting to the routing and the nutrient solution volumes, and the second one would be with third one would be with respect to the third experiment, where the plant would actually respond to various nitrate nutrient solution concentration. So on limelight of this, the plant has to make up with those kind of a mechanism where they would be able to have an adequate nutrient level in which is there. So this can automatically get adjusted with the help of the water, both the nitrogen and water absorptions. When it goes down, they need to fix it off. So this fixing would actually happen when there is a kinds of transport of the water and absorb the nutrients, some simultaneously absence of the gravity, they can be able to convert it, and they would be able to have a proper concentration whenever there is a lesser part. So they believe that the plants are able to smell the amount of the nutrients which has been available. So with the help of this nitrogen concentration is very low, the plant will absorb water, and thus water would more get into a nitrogen until it reaches an optimal level. Once the optimal level is been reached, then once adequate nitrogen level is being taken by the plant, they stop that and they ensure that the water is being given for them in a adequate basis. So basically they are working that how actually it supports the plants to be grown, and how would the reactions of the the plants happen in the International Space Stations. So this is all about it. These are the most interesting facts that one should know, what kind of researches these scientists are actually doing, which is not possible, which is impossible, they're trying to make it possible. So this is all some important facts and the mind-blowing informations that you have to know. So this is all about it, and again you have the working like how the beans would actually get placed into the centrifuge, where they have to get sprouted out, then they have to grow into the space station, then they have to get rotated, and that rotation should be created with the different amounts of the gravity, because here when the space stations they actually get changed with the gravity from microgravity conditions, they have to move on for the space station. How all these things happens is what the research is all about. So once they have been done, then they could actually allow the different kinds of gravitational levels effect to plants in the space, and they could actually look on for the other development of the plants as well. So this is all about, so this is purely on the International Space Station's life, astronauts, and what is that they are trying to do. So that's it. By this we have come to an end of this video. So these were the important articles for the day that one should focus, and hope this particular video would have helped you on your preparations. So work hard till you accomplish. Thank you and have a very nice day.